Hello, and welcome to the OVN podcast series dealing with the invisible injury. Today, we'll talk with two gentlemen. One, Dallas Blaney from Challenge America, a well-known organization that uses the arts to help veterans deal with the different traumas as PTSD, anxiety, depression, and various other factors and stressors that come with serving in the military. Also joining us is Chief Master Sergeant Dean Unger. Dean is a member of the Special Tactics community in the Air Force, serving as a combat controller. Dean has over 15 deployments, and his achievements include 4 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, as well as many other accolades and achievements he's accomplished throughout his military career. Additionally, Dean plays the guitar, and Dean will talk to us about how he used that guitar and music as a type of therapy throughout his time in the military. So stay tuned as we talk with these two gentlemen about music therapy and PTSD. Thanks again for joining us at OVN. Here at OVN, our goal is outreach, and it's really to reach our fellow veterans and in active military and their families, and really create avenues for them to get connected to care and support. As we all know, our veterans, it's something they deserve and they've earned, and that's what we like to do at OVN is help create that connection. And this podcast is just another way. With your organization, Dale, great organization, doing great things. With my brother, Dean, years of service that we'll talk about, and we'll get into that. So I really appreciate coming on. And, just to kick it off, I'm Tony. I'm one of the team leaders here at OVN. I'm a 22-year Air Force veteran, and just retired in 2006, and I miss it. So, but this is us at OVN. We've got about 7 chiefs on our board that are retired from the Air Force. Got a couple Army guys, got one Navy guy, and a few young Marines on there. So we have a good pool of people, and that's all of our mission. 100% volunteers, and we just go after it in helping our brothers and sisters out to serve. So what I'd like to do is just, Dean, you tell us a little bit about yourself. I always like to hear from the veterans. Especially a guy like you, 30 years ago now almost, you walked into a recruiter's office somewhere. If I remember right, were you a good swimmer or was that Paul Durst that was a good swimmer?
No, I was a decent swimmer.
Okay.
But going through the program that we did, swimming was really kind of the least of it. And it was a little bit more about your underwater confidence and your ability just to kind of, suck it up when you don't have air for a while,
right?
And
right.
kind of go through the stress of that. And that's what I saw people that were collegiate level swimmers that didn't make it through because it wasn't about how fast you could actually swim across the top of the water. It was how much confidence you have once you got underwater without the air,
right.
because that was such a great equalizer and such a great stressor that, and trying to simulate combat, trying to simulate the stress of being in combat, there's really no better way than to put you underwater. That's the greatest stressor that we can give you outside of putting you in a combat situation.
What's really interesting. So let's back up to the recruiter's office. So when you walked in there, did you have something like this in mind? And just so you know, Dale, I sent you Dean's bio, but he was a combat controller, so he's been in the special operations world almost all of it, well, really all of his career. But what made you join the military and get to where you are now, really?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I came in because, I grew up in a small town of Wisconsin and there was not a lot of opportunities. I couldn't afford college, and it was a little bit of an escape. I always had that desire to serve, but it was also a way to get out of there because, it was pretty much a dead end town. So I came into the delayed enlistment program, I think when I was 17 years old, and I got signed up and was prepared to leave. And basically as soon as I graduated high school, I left. I came in and I really had no idea of what I was going to get into. I came in for the mechanical field because I scored well on the aptitude for that. So I thought I was going to come in and work on airplanes and get my college degree and move on to bigger and better. What I didn't count on was when I was in basic training, we had some of the instructors from the selection course come over and gave us a little slideshow and a little briefing on what combat control and pararescue was all about. And it piqued my interest just enough that I decided to sign up for the first event, which was the PASS test, the physical ability and stamina test, which looking back, it wasn't that difficult, but it was just enough to kind of, make sure that you were in halfway decent shape. And I went through that and did pretty well on the day of. And literally it was just a mad rush. The first event was the pool. You get in and you're supposed to do, I think, a 500-meter swim, and there was no lanes, and it was just it was a free for all. So if you could withstand 2 laps of getting kicked and hit in the face, then all of a sudden the pool got real quiet because enough people had quit that, it made it a lot easier. So I think of all the people that went that day when I took it, which was in a neighborhood of 50 or 60,
Right.
three of us finished the entire test and elected to come in. And then even then, I did that first event because it was getting me out of basic training, which Air Force basic training was a little bit of a different animal back then. It wasn't so
Right.
tactically focused. It was a little bit more like how well you fold your t-shirts, and the true military stuff was a little bit secondary. And so for me, I was a little bit underwhelmed by what I was getting out of basic training.
Right.
And I went to that first event thinking I'm getting out of that stuff for a day.
Yeah.
And then I passed that, and they, had to do my next event the following weekend. And I went to the next one with the same mindset. And it wasn't until the very last event when there was a admin guy there, slid the piece of paperwork across the desk to me, the volunteer statement that says, hey, sign this and you're officially out of whatever job you were coming in the Air Force to do, and you're coming to the selection course. And literally it was like, I kind of like shrugged my shoulders, grabbed the pen, and I signed on the dotted line. And, they say that there's that saying that, it's not, the man that chooses the job chooses a man. And I really felt that was what happened, because once I got into it, it was my calling, and that's why I've been in now. I'm coming up on 30 years because I've loved it so much that I haven't wanted to leave it. So it's been incredible.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive. There's probably, in a career field like he's in, Dale, there's probably that made E9, chief. There's probably a couple hundred guys in probably the history of the career field that have been chiefs. It's a very, very small unit. And it didn't have the hype, I say hype, it has hype today more than ever. But, back when I met Dean, Dean told me something. He said, you know what, Tony, if you ever see us on CNN, that means a mission failed. You know what I mean? And I remember him saying that for some reason. And I said, oh, okay, well, we never see him on TV. He said, he must be pretty damn good. So Dale, tell us a little bit about yourself and, how you got involved in Challenge America.
Yeah, so it's Dallas, actually.
Oh, Dallas. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. So I'm the executive director of Challenge America, which in nonprofit speak is like being a CEO. In a former life, I'm a Navy veteran, but we were just talking about it. I got a humanitarian, about a year in. My parents were in a bad accident. So, and then I guess the big story for me is I was a crypto tech. So I was a Morse code guy in the Navy when I was in, and I was just getting ready to ship out for sub duty actually in Hawaii when I got out. And then a few years after that, I think once things settled down at home, I moved out to Colorado and got into whitewater rafting. So my story is all civilian, not military so much. And, I was a whitewater rafting guide really all over the country and all over Central America for about 23 years. And so did a lot of fun stuff doing that, and went to college while I was doing that, and ended up getting a doctorate, and then
nice.
went on to teach at the University of Wisconsin, and taught at other schools as well. And then just decided lifestyle change. Just wanted to, I had enough of the Midwest growing up in Ohio, and spent a little time out in Wisconsin. Nothing against Wisconsin, but I yearned for the mountains. It's my home.
Yeah.
So the wife and I moved out to Aspen, and just on a lark, and found, just kind of stumbled my way into what I'm doing now. And it's very much, Dean, what you were saying, the job sometimes finds you. And I think that's definitely true in my case. I would never have chosen this path for myself. If you asked me 20 years ago what I'd be doing today, it wouldn't be this, but I'm really happy, and I love what I do. And I think we get to do really amazing work for veterans and their families, which is, really incredible.
Well, I tell you, first of all, you raised your right hand, Dale. I tell everybody that I meet, life takes us different paths, but
Yeah.
anybody that, steps up and says, hey, I'm going to serve my country, and they volunteer to do that. I don't care if it's 6 months or 30 years. You know what I mean? It's, thank you for your service. I mean, that's great. And what more, in my opinion, honorable thing to do than you're out there and to work, every day you're helping our fellow veterans. So, you're giving back. That's a really, really cool thing. So, and like I say, just what I've read about Challenge America, it's pretty impressive. So,
Thank you.
Back to you, Dean, as I brought us together, there was a reason we chose Dean, and, Dean used music throughout his career in a certain avenue. And so you play the guitar, right, Dean?
That's correct. It was something I always wanted to do. I always had a love of music growing up. That was, every night I can remember going to bed with headphones on and, put on something on the stereo. And so music was always just a part of my life. And after I came into the military and I was going through my training, one of the guys that I was going through all of our training with, he brought a guitar, and, he was a player, and he taught me my first 3 chords. And just kind of like that was it, and I was hooked. So I went out a couple weekends later and found myself a cheap guitar at a pawn shop, and taught myself how to play, and been doing it ever since.
That's cool. So what kind of music do you play mostly?
It's a mix. I mean, I kind of grew up on rock, and what we now consider classic rock.
Right.
So that's still kind of what I tend to focus on a lot. But over the years, that's been the main meat of it. But I've also been involved. I've led 2 different church bands,
nice.
Doing kind of like the contemporary worship style.
Yeah.
And so I've certainly got quite a bit of that in my background now too. So.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So tell us, we just touched on your military career, Dean. I want everybody watching to just get an idea. When we talk about dealing with the stresses of serving, basic training can be stressful in itself. It's not something just your everyday person goes to, but then we expand into our career fields and things like that. You chose a career field that is very demanding. Physically is a given in that career field, but, talk a little bit about, what were some of the stressful things, probably maybe, the top 2 or 3 things that were probably the hardest for you to deal with, as an airman, as an NCO, things like that. Was it being away? Was it the mental aspects of it? Just give us an idea of what the challenges were for you.
Yeah, mental is always, a big part of what we do, and like when we're going through our initial training, the selection where, my selection course, we started with 68 guys and 8 of us graduated at the end of the 8 weeks. It was, 80 to 90% mental.
Mm-hmm.
We had guys that were physical specimens, collegiate athletes, like I said, swimmers, and they didn't make it. And it wasn't because they didn't have the physical skills to do it. They didn't have the mental, the strength of mind to press on when the going got tough. And when somebody quits the first time, that's all it takes. And it becomes so much easier after that. It doesn't matter what kind of aspect of your life it is.
Right.
Quit once and you've given yourself an out for anything that gets hard.
Right.
And that's kind of what our training focused on, and was about pushing you past your limits and seeing who gave up and who motored on.
Right.
Because the body is capable of far more than we give it credit for. We believe it's capable of, and you just sometimes got to kind of ignore it and drive on. And
right.
that was initially definitely some of the hardest things was having to, number one, see people that you looked at and judged as, well, that dude is far stronger than I am, and then he's quitting. And when I was at the time, 150 pounds, young guy from Wisconsin who, like I didn't think I was where I should be. I didn't think I was on par with other people. Mm-hmm. And then when halfway through the course, most of those guys are gone and I was still there, it still hadn't switched over in my head. So definitely the mental side is one of the more difficult aspects of what we do. and that certainly carries over even after, you start going on deployments and you start getting involved in combat operations. The mental side is still what the toughest part of it is, because you do have to compartmentalize a bit, because you can't feel the fear, you can't feel, the apprehension, because you've got a job to do and you got to press on. And that's exactly what, like our training initially did for us was help to recognize that, man, you just got to go,
Right. So you've served in, were you in Desert Storm?
I wasn't, no.
Okay.
Come on, Tony, I'm not quite that old.
Sorry, I was. So,
No.
yeah.
No, almost. I was waiting. So that was January of 91. I came in June of 91.
91. Okay. All right. So you were OEF, OIF. You've been through
Correct.
the gamut. So we pretty much just about been at war most of your career. So
yeah, it was about the 10-year mark. Yeah, it was 10 years. 2001 was 10 years of service, and I was just getting checked into our special mission unit when 9/11 happened. So 20 years. I spent 15 years at that unit after that, and just nonstop deployments. So it was.
So what'd you say? Yeah, about 15 deployments.
Yeah, about 15.
What was your average deployment length, do you think, if you had kind of ballpark average?
3 to 4 months was our kind of standard, and it was just the cycle we were on was a 3-month training cycle followed by a 3-month alert cycle followed by a 3-month deployment cycle, and then rinse and repeat. And then at one point in the middle of it, we switched to 4-month cycles. So that was pretty much the length of it, just based on where I was at. I know, some units and some organizations go for 180 days to a year at a time.
Right.
So it was a little different, but we were going more often.
Right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, as much as you want to talk about, when we were back, first of all, folks, I'll post some, we've got some cool pictures Dean sent us that are cleaned up from some of his deployments. But I think, how many Bronze Stars do you have?
4
Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about, in Dallas, this is where we'll talk a little bit about where music therapy really came into there. And, I'd like to share Dean, share as much as your stories you're comfortable with, and really we'll start to talk about the music side, but tell us a little bit about Iraq and kind of where some of your where you realized there were some things you needed a little bit of help with, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, I'll take a few minutes to kind of go through. I don't mind sharing it, because I know that, there's so many more people who don't share, and they desperately need to, and they need to see that, man, it's not a weakness to come forward and get help. So I had already done a couple of deployments. I'd done an Afghanistan deployment. I did the initial push into Iraq when we first invaded, and did quite a bit of missions during that rotation, and then came back home, went over on the next rotation to Iraq, which was in January 2004. And within 3 weeks, so January of 2004 was pretty much the start of the IED threat. That's when they really started using them against U.S. forces. And I just so happened to be one of the lucky recipients of the other end of it. I was with a small team of two Humvees, armored Humvees, not the armor like of today, with the shielded turrets and everything. They were pretty much lightly armored, but still slightly. There was 6 of us, and we were going out to do a transit from one location to the next after doing a mission, and left our safe house up in Mosul in Iraq. Made a couple turns. It was in the evening, like darkness had already set. And we made a turn down one road, and all of a sudden there was no cars, there was no people out, and every one of us afterwards said the hair stood up on the back of our neck. We all knew that something didn't seem right, and it didn't matter. I was in the turret because I was the one, being the CCT guy, the combat controller, I'm the one talking to the airplanes. And in those armored Humvees, the best place to talk to airplanes was up out of them. So I had my antenna on my radio so that I could actually talk to anything. Like I said, I started to kind of squat down to say something to Sammy, the driver, and I saw a flash, and then everything went black. I was lucky in the fact that I said like that was the beginning of the IED threat, because it was pretty an unsophisticated device. We believe, based on the frag that we pulled out of the side of the vehicle, that it was like a 105 millimeter round for like a howitzer that was just buried in the median of the road. Blast went off right off the back corner of the Humvee I was in. Kind of knocked us a little bit off our wheels, but Sammy, the driver, did a phenomenal job getting it back under control. As I, pretty much as soon as the blast went off, I dropped down inside. And, if there's any humor in it, my helmet, the straps, I took a frag wound to the back of the neck, and it cut the straps on my helmet, as well as cut a big swath of flesh out of the back of my neck. And when I dropped, my helmet landed in his lap. And his initial reaction was he was holding my head. Somehow in the middle of it, I came to. I looked at him, he looked at my helmet, he looked at me while he's fighting for control of the vehicle. And he's like, like I said, all the while fighting for control. And he looks down at me and he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, go.
Right.
I'm sure there was some explicatives in there, but I'll share those. I won't share those. And we got out of there and got over to the base at Mosul. Like I said, I'd been knocked out. Had the frag wound in my neck, but overall, I was, for what happened, I got very lucky. Got sewn up and went home from the deployment. 9 months later, I went back to Afghanistan. So, I never really came out of the rotation. I came home from that deployment. I healed up and went back, and then I came home from that deployment, and then I went back, and it was about 12 years after the fact. And I had left the unit finally, I'd ranked up. So for us, once you kind of make E8 and E9, you are no longer on the team. You're more, ops manager, ops superintendent types of position. And that, that's what happened. So I moved up, I did ops superintendent for a year, and then I had to leave the following year. So I went over and did a headquarters role in Germany at the Theater Special Operations Command. While I was there, my wife and I happened to be up in Landstuhl at the hospital there for an appointment for her. And while we're sitting there, she picks up one of those pamphlets sitting on the table, and it's like, signs and symptoms of TBI.
Right.
And she's like, hey, look at that. Yeah. Hey, did any of this look familiar? And she's like going line by line, and we're sitting there recognizing every single one of those symptoms that I had been exhibiting over the years. And it wasn't until that moment, when she kind of outlined it to me that, hey, you're different. She knew me before combat operations started, and she knew me afterwards.
Right.
And it wasn't until she kind of urged, hey, you probably need to go get checked out. And so I did. I contacted the clinic that they have up there. They did an intake screening for me, and it was a matter of like the same thing. The lady who was doing my screening, Sarah, was just, hey, have you ever been knocked out? And I was like, yeah. She's like, well, how many times? I don't know. And like every single thing that she was going down her list on, I had been through. Near concussive blast, breaching charges, bombing ranges, and she asked me, well, how many times you've been around demolition charges? I'm like, I don't know. I used to teach demolition. So hundreds of, and she's like, you need to go through this program. So I did. I got permission from work, took 6 weeks away, and I went through their program that they run at the TBI clinic there, which it was the first time I had been seriously looked at and diagnosed with having had a traumatic brain injury.
Right.
And when they look back at my records, they basically said, well, with everything we currently see in your brain on this MRI and everything you're telling us, we would have classified what you sustained as a moderate level TBI, which, that's beyond the normal concussion range. That's, unfortunately, there's sometimes people get that type of an injury and they don't function so well in society anymore.
Yeah, right.
So quite a bit of a blessing that not only had I survived it, but I had still managed to climb up in rank, and I still was functional, and I still was able to do my job.
Yeah.
But the scary part was that, I let it go for so long without getting taken care of.
Well, I think that's an important thing. You know, two key things that I look at there is, thank God for the spouses in the military, whether it's the man or the woman, the boyfriends, the girlfriends, the partners, the kids. I always tell my kids, you're like mini veterans. You know what I mean? They've lived on bases, all those things. But such an important thing for any family members listen, veterans listen. She picked up on that. We're too absorbed with ourselves. There's nothing wrong with us. We're okay. We can go. Especially in a career field like yours. Showing any kind of weakness there is not something you want to show. So, what's kind of, just for some of the other family members, veterans, what are some of the signals she picked up on in that pamphlet that kind of drew that attention?
Yeah, some of the key ones were, a change in personality. So like I said earlier, she knew me beforehand and she knew me afterwards. And beforehand, I was a very happy-go-lucky. I was a little bit more jovial than I am now, and I have been for the last 10 or so years. And so that was one of the key things. But then also just a very almost like a quick temper, to where I would react to things a little bit unjustified for the level of what it was. And I ran her through the ringer. She, like, I'm lucky she's still here with me, just because like we can be some her and I jokingly, I'm grumpy all the time, and there's a reason for it, and I'm different than I was because of experiences I've been through, and so it's, I'm thankful that she had the strength to kind of stand up and say, hey, look, there's some things that are different about you, and you need to go get looked at. And that's the thing, is majority of the time, it's, especially for guys like us, it's going to be the words of a spouse or a child that is what's going to convince them to go get help, because we don't want to stop doing our job. We don't, and there's this big stigma around getting mental health treatment, that everybody thinks, well, if I go try to get some help, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my security clearance. And yes, there are certain things, schizophrenia, for one, is completely incompatible with military service. If you're going to get help for that, then you got bigger problems.
Yeah, hopefully somebody's catching that. Yeah, right.
But having stress or having symptoms related to things like traumatic brain injuries and PTSD is not something that's automatically going to eliminate you from a security clearance or from doing your job.
Right.
Like I said, there's just such a stigma associated with that, and it's so prevalent that it's one of the reasons why I do speak up and why I have been vocal. I've been involved in the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program for the last several years. I'm an ambassador for them, and I go and give talks. I tell my story to try to help others come to the realization that they can do it as well. That they need to. So
Hey, and the care inside the military has gotten so much better at understanding, what I mean? PTSD, absolutely. TBI, depression, things like that. Well, let's shift gears into, the music therapy. So when did you pick up the guitar and realize that there was a connection there, that this, this kind of helped you out? How'd that all start?
Look, like I told you earlier, I've just, my whole adult life now, I've been playing guitar, and somewhere in about the 2005 timeframe, so deployments had already started. A buddy of mine that I was in the unit with, he had grown up with a guy that has actually, he's been in some very big, well-known bands, and he was a singer for them in high school. Difference was, my buddy got his girlfriend pregnant in high school and figured he better do something with his life. So he came in the Air Force to, to do something more than try to be a singer in a rock band.
Rock star, yeah.
Whereas the other guy went on, and that was exactly what he did. So anyway, Jerome and I would get together, and, we would just have little impromptu jam sessions, because he was a great singer, and it was fun. And about 2005 timeframe, he had met up with a couple other folks, all from inside of our organization, the command I was at. And, one day he comes to work and tells me, he's like, hey man, you got to come hang out with us. I met this other group that they're all, kind of like us. Right. And, got a couple guitar players. And I just started singing with them, and they're awesome. And so I hopped in with them, and, we're like, well, this is a lot of fun, and so we put together a little band and we started playing out in town, and it did quite, it was, nobody was, we weren't trying to write songs.
Yeah,
We
right.
weren't trying to make it big. It was fun. It was what we loved doing. So we all would get together, we'd practice maybe once a month, twice a month, and we'd go and play a gig or two, out in town, and we just had a great time doing it. So that was kind of like the first I'd been involved in playing in a band.
Yeah.
And but every single deployment I've been on, I had a guitar with me.
Yeah.
When I landed at the Baghdad airport on the taxiway, because the runway had bombed out on the very first night any Americans had gotten through the Baghdad airport,
Right.
I had a guitar in my kit. And after we would get done doing missions, that's usually the first thing I would do, is I'd go back and grab my guitar and I'd start playing. It was my way to unwind, especially after coming off the X. So, like I said, I just always had a guitar with me. Still didn't really have much of a realization of what it was doing. And it wasn't until, so I told you about the Air Force Wounded Warrior program. I went to one of they do these care events, and obviously right now it's a little different with COVID going on.
Yeah,
They
right.
don't have them in person. But I went to one down in Florida about 2 years ago now, and they bring in a guy that runs a nonprofit a guy named Wes Gear. And Wes was a guitarist in the early 90s for a band called Head PE out in California. And, he readily tells a story. He gets, they started, making some money, and
Right.
they all kind of went off the deep end on drugs, and he almost lost his life because of it. Got clean. And after he got clean, he got hired in Korn.
Oh,
And,
wow. Okay.
He kind of jokes and says, I never knew that I'd have to get clean to get hired in a band like Korn, but here I was.
Good point. Yeah.
But then their other guitarist, the one that he had replaced, he had gone off and gotten clean, and then came back. And of course, they said, they gave him his walking papers. And so he said he was, at this point about 40 years old. And he's like, I'm a 40-year-old unemployed guitarist, and what do I do with my life? And what he had, done some studying and everything on music itself.
Yeah.
And he started a nonprofit, and it's called Rock to Recovery. And what he does is he goes into rehab centers, and him and he's got a couple other musicians that go in with him, and with people that some may have some, musical inclination, some don't. He will give them, cymbals or shakers or whatever they can do, or, like you teach them a couple keys on the keyboard and say, all right, as we're playing this, you do this.
Yeah.
And in the course of a week, they will write a song, and then they will perform it for the center. And so that was kind of what he was doing. Well, he got hired on to come join us at our Air Force programs,
Right.
To do this with the vets, because the things that happen to your brain, when you've been addicted to drugs, the damage that happens is not a whole lot different than what happens to the brain when you sustain TBIs or PTSD. Right. And so the thought process was, well, it's a recovery method, and it's just one of those things that, some people like journaling, some people like doing yoga, some people like playing music. And the way he states it, and, like my first interaction with him, and he's, we kind of sitting around in a circle, kind of talking, everybody's kind of telling a little bit about their story. Right. And he tells us, he says, one of the things that he's found is that, and scientifically, when you listen to music, you engage half your brain. When you make music, you engage your entire brain. And the therapeutic process that goes on when you're doing that, and especially like if you have a TBI, you may have, neural pathways that are disrupted. Yeah. Those pathways are broken. And when you engage your whole brain, basically it's training it to work different pathways to do the things that it needs to do. And it's, like I said, it's using your whole brain, which is the big difference between just, putting on an album and listening to it versus getting up there and actually playing music.
Right.
And so here I am, over 20 years after learning how to play guitar, 15 deployments with a guitar with me every single time, having sustained a TBI. I haven't been diagnosed with PTSD.
Right.
And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, like I mentioned earlier, somebody with a moderate level TBI, typically they have a lot worse off, prognosis
right
immediately after the fact than what I did. And in my own head, and obviously there's no way to prove it, putting two and two together, I was like, I think because I've been, making music my whole adult life.
Right.
I think there's something to the fact that that probably kept me from being far worse off than what I ended up being. And so, you know, coming to that realization, it was like I've started. I'm studying psychology right now. I'm finishing up. I got 5 classes left to finish my
Nice.
bachelor's degree, and the majority of my papers and everything I've had to write, I've focused on that.
No,
And
nice.
you know, so I'm learning the scientific part and you know the psychological part of it as well, just so I kind of have that knowledge built in, because you know, as we talked about, I'd love to be able to help vets, you know,
Right.
using music to help them in their recovery process, because there really is something to that.
Right.
And so that's kind of it. You know, that's how
That's cool.
I came to the realization about what the guitar did for me.
Yeah, that's great. You know, let's shift over to Dallas and really, you know, from that, Dallas, tell us a little bit about, you know, at Challenge America, when I know you have retreats and different things like that, but, you know, everything from an example of what you see veterans come to you with, and how does the program really work, you know, with music therapy?
Yeah, I think, well, thanks for the question. And Dean, thanks for your story. I mean, when you were talking, I was nodding my head and just saying, yeah, I get that. And
Yeah.
the point about the brain being fully active when you're making music, that's absolutely true. It's scientifically true that they've done so many studies and found that when you're playing music, it activates the 2 hemispheres of the brain to communicate with each other in a way that nothing else does. And that really helps to promote the healing process for the brain. It's not a miracle cure by any
Yeah.
stretch, but you know, I've got to tell you guys, I've been to every single music therapy retreat we've done since we started working on these 6 years ago, and the transformation I see for veterans who go through our program, it's unbelievable, and it's every single time, and it's just about every single veteran. It's really incredible to witness.
That's great.
But we got into doing music therapy in a roundabout way. Our honorary co-founders are Vince Gill and Amy Grant. And Vince and Amy have a farm outside of Nashville. And so back around 2015, 2016, we were working with a board certified music therapist. So Dean, you should check out music therapy as a career path for you. I could see that being a great fit. We worked with a board certified music therapist to develop a program for veterans. And so it really was, you know, a lot of music therapists get all wound up about this, you know, how people calling things music therapy when there's no music therapist, that kind of stuff. But,
Yeah.
you know, I got to tell you, at least in my experience, it was really comforting to have someone trained to do this sort of work, because when you're working with a veteran who has never been exposed to this kind of modality, you know, using music in this way for healing, as Wes is doing, which is incredible work. Sometimes the emotions it summons up aren't always positive. It just,
Yeah.
it's sort of like letting the genie out of the bottle, and you don't always know what you're going to get. And having someone there who's trained to identify those symptoms and deal with them appropriately is really helpful. But our music therapy, our focus is a little different, I think, from a lot of other programs, because our focus isn't so much on, you know, running around the country and doing music therapy retreats all year. Our focus initially was to develop a program that we could demonstrate was effective. So we do all these studies before and after, and assess the efficacy of the work we do. And then once we got to a point where we felt, you know, pretty confident that what we were doing was spot on, then what we did was we started to train the trainers. So we started a program where we were teaching music therapists around the country how to work with veterans and how to deliver, as an example, the type of program that we deliver. And that's been really effective. And that's what we've been doing a lot of these last couple of years. And the goal is to try to spread the work that way, so that there are music therapists who are excited and motivated to work with the veterans in their local communities. And we're starting to see that happen now, which is really exciting. Of course, that's all before COVID, as Dean was saying.
Yeah.
So we aren't immune to that. But I'm really excited to say that one of the things that we're doing now is we're working with the VA.
Yeah.
We're going to adapt our in-person program to a virtual one. You know, I think one of the things that's so important for people to realize is that veterans are a little unique demographic demographically. 1 in 3 veterans lives in a rural area. And rural veterans don't get access to the kinds of services their urban counterparts do.
Right.
And so we're trying to find, in some respects, that's the bright lining of COVID-19, is that, it's prompted a lot of organizations like ours. It's kind of given us the space that we didn't have before, to think about how we can address those kinds of challenges. So we're working with the VA now, and we're going to do a pilot this year with 5 different sites around the country, to try to develop and polish this virtual music therapy program. But ours is more compressed maybe than what Dean went through. Ours is our in-person programs 3 days. One thing we do that might be a little different too is that the first thing we do is we have a dinner. And when we do this in Nashville, usually Amy Grant comes out, and
nice.
she cooks spaghetti for everybody. It was a lot of fun. And we ask the families to come too.
Nice.
This is important because one of the things I've learned, you guys, is that if you don't get the family, and you touched on it, Tony, if you don't get the family involved, then it's unlikely that these kinds of approaches are going to stick. Because one thing you need to do is you need to get buy-in from the family to encourage the veteran to keep on with that sort of work, to continue to use the tools. And then you also, and I think, Dean, you'll probably, this might resonate with you. You also need the time and the space to do it. And so you have to get buy-in from your family to allow you that time and space to pick up the guitar, to sit down with a pen, to practice mindfulness, to do all of those things that are so helpful. But you need to get buy-in from the family to do it. So we include the family through our program as much as we possibly can.
That's great.
But if I'm not taking too much time, the one
No, this is good. This is what we want to hear.
Okay. Well, great. The other thing we do is to try to build trust with the veterans who participate in our program is we give them a guitar, and we don't give it to them at the end of the program. We give it to them on the first day. And we found that really builds trust. There's a lot of anxiety veterans face just coming to something like this. And, one of the ways we've been able to break that down is by saying, look, we're making an investment in you before we even really know who you are. We're giving you this guitar, and we're going to trust you're going to stick with it. And we haven't had anybody who's bailed out on us yet. So far it seems to be working pretty well.
That's awesome.
But the other thing I'll say is that one of the struggles we have, Dean, I don't know if Wes has this challenge as well, but one of the challenges we've always had is that we have these great retreats, right? And the veterans, it's like transformative for the veterans. I mean, you just see it. I mean, to take a veteran who could barely speak to anyone,
right,
socially just wasn't in that space, and 3 days later, they're up on a stage and they're singing to a crowd of strangers. That's a radical transformation in 3 days. But the problem we always had, you guys, is that we always struggled with how we keep it going and how we keep these veterans connected to one another.
Yeah.
And connected to a broader community of veterans. And so one of the things we've done over the course of this pandemic is we've really kind of explored the virtual space, if you will. And just last month, we launched a new program. It's a national veteran arts community called CAV Arts, C-A-V.
I read a little bit about that. Okay.
Yeah, and the real inspiration for doing this was the experience we had with our music therapy retreats, that we always struggled to try to find an effective way to keep veterans knitted together before, during, and after our retreat.
Right.
And so that's what this is designed to do. And so far it's been amazing. And in the first month, we've got close to 1,300 members nationwide, pretty much in all 50 states. And people are going on there, they're sharing their art, they're collaborating, they're striking up new relationships, they're learning new art forms. It's really incredible. So really excited to test this and put it to work on our music therapy programs too, to see if we can sustain the momentum we build up in our retreats. And what's great about it, you guys, is that, if, for example, Dean, if you want to share this with Wes, if you want to share it with anyone else in the music community or any arts community, we aren't territorial about it. Even though we do music therapy retreats, we invite all these organizations to come on.
Yeah.
share what they're doing, connect up with veterans, you know, and really at the end of the day, our mission is to help veterans and their families. And, you know, it's not about us versus them or any of that. If we're all on the same mission, then we should all get along. And
Right.
so anyway, so I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the work that we've been doing around music therapy, and it's pretty exciting stuff.
That's awesome. And you know, a couple things that you said, Dallas, that I really wanted to hit on is, as an outreach organization, you know, we're about 3 years old, but exactly what you said is, you know, me and a few of our other group, we wanted to do something to help veterans, but we looked at just thousands and thousands of organizations that say we help veterans, and that's great. But we had to kind of
countrywide.
Yeah, we started to weed our way through. So two things you mentioned, and this is something to think about, Dean, and anybody that's wanting to do things to help veterans. This is through a lot of research, a lot of study, and in Dallas, I'm sure you've seen this, but the majority of the, not concerns, but the trouble most nonprofits have is the follow-up, sticking with the veteran. And the feedback from veterans is, you know, I got an initial response, or I went to the program, but then I never heard anything again. So to hear a program like yours is taking the time to focus on the follow through, because as you know, when you're in a program, you come out and you're feeling great. You've just been connected. I feel really good. And then this is the same thing you're going to see, Dean, with we tie this together with what we call transitional stress. I left the military, man, I'm back in my hometown. I still got money in my pocket. I got a job. 6 months later, that job's not quite what I thought it was. People don't treat me like a chief anymore in the military. And I'm not digging this, you know, and that family of our military, our base is no longer there, you know. I moved away from a military base. You know, my wife had, you know, not trouble, but that was different for her. But so to hear that, that's so important to stick with them, to create networks, and veterans listen to each other. I mean, we do more outreaches at live events, and I can tell you, we put veterans, we have volunteers come in and help us at our outreach center or setups. And a veteran walks up and it's literally like within 2 or 3 minutes, it's like you've known this individual for, you know, weeks and months, and you can really break down barriers and really start to have good conversations. So the other side that you mentioned, Dallas, is the family. I'm glad you brought that up again. Dean, I'm glad you brought that up. I would say at least 60% of the connections we get to veterans to care, support, different things, that comes from a family member. They're the one that's not afraid to ask, hey, how do we do this? You know, and I'll tell you one last thing from just our live events. And to give you an example is, we'll go to a motorsports event. We'll go to a World Snowcross. We're up in Wisconsin. We just finished in Eagle River. Okay, Eagle River, Wisconsin. They had the, you know, snowmobile capital of the world and all this. This Saturday on CBS Sports, you'll see some stuff about OVN at the Snowcross. We have never had an event like that, any event where I have not had somebody walk up to me, and it's the most painful part of doing this, and say, yeah, I had a family member, I had a teammate commit suicide. And it's like, it's shocking to me how common it is all over the United States. And that's really why we said, as OVN, we want to go find people like your organization, Dallas. And we need to let Dean, you know, you're coming out and you got a great story to tell. We got to get the young guys coming out after 4 years, comfortable with it, say it's okay, and get them to programs like Challenge America and things like that. And, you know, and I know, Dallas, you've got much more than just music therapy there. You know, it's impressive, the portfolio of services and opportunities there for veterans. So I think I can't say that enough. That's the biggest two things: family, and continue that. 6 months later, 12 months later, that veteran needs that somebody pick up the phone and say, hey, how you doing? You know what I mean? Hey, how you been? I can tell you that every veteran I've taught, it's like a shot in the arm. You remembered me. I have actually been told that. You remembered me. you know, so really, really important stuff and great things you all are doing. Dean, you know, hats off, buddy. I mean, one hell of a career. I mean, you served this country, and to think that you want to walk out after 30 years and then just give back to the veteran community, you know what, you know, that just, you know, I'm proud of you. I mean, and just to know you, I mean, that's a great thing. So, so I really, I want to thank you guys again for coming on. And as I always do, I always ask each of my guests, if you had the whole veteran and military community sitting there in front of you, what would you say to them, Dean, about getting care, being open, you know, asking for help?
Probably the first thing is take care of yourself and your family. Too many times, guys and girls, they will run their family into the ground at the cost of the service that they're doing. You know, they're serving the nation, and family is second nature to them. You know, they or it's not second nature, it's their second thought.
Sure. Yeah.
They need to flip that around, because at the end of the day, you know, my time's coming up here real shortly, and when, you know, my 30 years is done and I no longer put on the uniform, I don't have the team room to go back to. You know, I've got my family, and if I've been running them through the ringer for 30 years, and you know, they're not going to want to stick around when I don't have that military service to go to anymore. So certainly, take care of them. You know, obviously there's times where service comes first, but there's too many times that it doesn't, and people don't learn that lesson. So that's probably number one thing I would say. The second thing is, you know, in taking care of yourself and your family, you make yourself better at your job, because you don't have distractions when you don't need, when you can't have them.
Yeah. Great words, buddy. I tell you what, I think back in my career, and I needed to sit on this podcast 22 years ago, you know, so Dallas, for you, can you give us, for a veteran that wants to know more about your program, or look at the retreat or the pilot program, give us a little bit of information on how they get, you know, connected to Challenge America and in your different programs.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, if anybody wants to learn more, and Tony's right, you know, we do a lot more. We love the arts. We do a lot of work in the arts, but we do other things as well. So we have a military sisterhood initiative, which is a national peer support network for women veterans. We have an incubator program that develops innovative products for injured veterans. It goes on and on. You know, we just can't help ourselves. We just love the work that we do, and try to be as creative as possible. So to answer your question,
right,
I'm a recovering professor, so I get lazy and just put that up. So yeah, so if you want to learn more, and I'd love it if you did, please reach out to us. The best way to do that, you know, just check us out on the website, and that's Challenge America, all one word, challengeamerica.com. And then you can learn about all the work that we're doing, see, you know, what we've been up to these past couple of years, especially during the pandemic. And I'd love to hear from you. Sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date on what we're up to. And once we're ready to announce where we're going to do our music therapy programs, if you want to get involved with those, that's the best way to stay in touch with that news.
Cool. Yeah, I'm definitely, I've been watching the website, and so I'll stay connected there. So, all right. Well, I'll make sure when we get this posted, I'll share the websites and so on. Dean, if you wouldn't mind, any of those programs you work with, shoot me some websites. We'll share them with the group. You know, the community comes out and listens. Gentlemen, thank you again. Good information. Your experiences are worth a lot to a lot of veterans and families out there. So that's all I got. Have a good evening, and then God bless you. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Tony. Dean, it's great to meet you.